So, during EGX, lead level designer on Star Citizen Michael Barclay took part in a panel titled From Uncharted to Star Citizen, Game Design Across Genres. In this panel, Michael and 3 others talk about how game design skills can be applied to very different experiences. I don't believe this session was recorded, so this may actually be exclusive footage, so let's say it's a little treat while I work on Star Citizen Sunday. Luckily, Michael went first as I had to rush off early, so here is what he has to say. Enjoy.
First off, I'm going to be handing over to Mr. Michael Barclay here. We're going to have a little game of musical chairs, so if you can bear with us.
So I go there?
Yep.
When I
try
step
not
over.
to throw up, yep.
Cool.
There we go.
Awesome. If I do this. Do you see a big Star Citizen picture up there? Cool. So, yeah, this is cozy. This is cool. I'm going to move around a bit. So yeah, space games, let's talk about that. They're making a big comeback right now. One of my favorite space sims at the moment is just there, Elite Dangerous. I'm working at Cloud Imperium Games, as Scoop mentioned. My name's Michael Barclay, and I'm the lead level designer on Star Citizen. So Star Citizen, I think I've found since I've worked at Cloud Imperium, it's been really difficult to actually describe to people what it is. You know, it's multiplayer, it's single player. I think we've got about 5 company names. There's Rupert Space Industries, there's Foundry 42. You know, it's got FPS in it, but it's also a space sim. We started jokingly calling it an everything simulator in the office. But now, actually, you know, we've taken that to heart. You know, it shows you the ambition of the project. This talk is about space to ground. Systemic design is at the heart of everything that we're doing for Star Citizen. In more general terms, it just means that we're more interested in sandboxes than cinematics, although we also have cinematics. So, space to ground. What does space to ground even mean? It could just be a marketing blurb, you know, something that we would stick on the back of a box. Destiny, if anybody's playing Destiny at the moment, that's got space to ground. You know, you'd be in the tower, you'd bring out Nolan bot, you would say, I want to go to inner space, and there'd be a loading screen, and you're there. And the same vice versa. On the way back down, loading screen, you know, you're on Venus or something. That's not quite what I mean when I talk about space to ground for Star Citizen, though. What I'm talking about is the seamless transitioning from being in your starship, landing on an asteroid or a space station, and getting out and walking around. I do want to throw in a quick caveat that we currently do have load screens on some environments in the game at the moment, but today I'm just talking about those areas where seamless transitioning is possible. So Star Citizen, it's a game about great scale. It's enormous, both the project and the environments that we're building in the game. The environments are so big that we had to break open CryEngine and cast some magic just so that we could build levels that are thousands of times the size that CryEngine was originally capable of. We've got an asset in the game. It's a mining rig. Specifically, it's one of the biggest assets I've ever seen in any game ever, like scale, poly count, and the lot. We were at Gamescom this year, just past. We showed off sort of like a slice of the game. It was set in pretty much a realistically scaled part of the solar system, of a solar system in the game. I'm going to play this right now, and hopefully, is that playing? All right, hang on. Now? Cool. So, yeah, just to take you through the philosophy of what we wanted to show at Gamescom, we start off by showing something small, something really important, the player's helmet. The helmet will stop you from suffocating when you're floating around in space. And then as the player opens up the shutters and looks outside, you can see all the tiers of play space that are available in Star Citizen. There's AI and players flying around outside, and you transition from what is your bedroom through the space station, and eventually you end up outside getting into your starship. Just a quick note about the space station that you're on. This thing's got its own physics grid and its own local gravity, and we've got dozens of these things like in a system right now. They're all aligned differently, they can rotate, nobody's falling off them and falling through the world, so they're all localized. Even more exciting than that, I think, is we've got these things, these capital ships. These are huge. They're pretty much the size of like a multiplayer level in an FPS. And they've got their own local physics and their own local gravity. And they move through space. So essentially we've got levels flying through levels. And as you'll see in a moment, you can do all that and walk around on those ships while you're traveling at 0.2 the speed of light. We're currently working on 0.3. So the ship that you can see on screen at the moment is called a Cutlass. There's players walking around in the back of that at the moment. This is the Gamescom footage that we showed this year, so it's on YouTube if anybody wants to check it out. So obviously, size matters in Star Citizen, but it's also a game about agency. We're interested in the stories that players can tell, just create themselves. Our goal is to just provide the systems that let players do that and create a core set of level design principles. So for us, Space to Ground is more than just a core system. It's the game. It's what the game is about. Transitioning seamlessly from all layers of the universe. So whether you're jumping between solar systems in a galaxy, or jumping between bodies in a solar system, landing on a moon or an asteroid or a space station and getting out and walking around, we want to build a world that can be navigated at all these tiers. Some space stations there and the mining rig that I was talking about. So in his GDC 2013 talk, one of my favorite developers at the moment, Dan Pinchbeck, he heads up the Chinese room. He spoke about finding a tin of beans in DayZ and how important a tin of beans can be in that game. He touched on how the player would start looking for something as small as that tin. When he started Star Citizen, we posed the question, how would a player find a tin of beans in the galaxy, in any solar system? How would they start doing that? And how could we build a game that would let them do that? Is it like finding a needle in a haystack? Not quite. Firstly, because you've got a spaceship to help you get around. But we didn't want to go and add some kind of detect bean signature to the ship's radar. So we wanted to build a legitimate world. How would we give them an intuitive method of finding any important item in the galaxy? It requires a few things, the first of which is affordance. Now, as a principle, basically affordance is if something looks like it affords me something, it should. It's a perceived signal or clue that an object may be used to perform a particular action. Like a handle it affords pulling, it affords picking up. By adhering to the principles of affordance, we can create challenges and obstacles that players can begin to problem solve intuitively. It's sort of like experience-based problem solving. And you can carry that real-world experience-based problem solving even into a game set 900 years in the future, about fighting aliens, a sci-fi game. We just want to be able to develop the challenges in a way that teach players about the language of the game as well. So there's still some core level design principles as well. An example of how systemic design is at the heart of Star Citizen is just, for example, through our location dressing, item placement, just how we ensure consistency with the way we're placing items and building environments. It seems obvious, but we don't go around putting tins of beans under people's beds or scattered in bins throughout the universe. They can be in mismatched locations, but only if we apply some appropriate environmental storytelling that might explain how that item got there. Each thing's got its place. We want to build legitimate spaces that conform to certain rules. So back to finding this tin of beans. With these elements in place, affordance, legitimacy, a player in the middle of a galaxy might start off scanning for a human sector. Human sectors have probably got space stations with habitation units. Habitation units have probably got kitchens. Kitchens might have a tin of beans. So you find a human system, you go there, you find a space station with a habitation unit. You're constantly narrowing the search down. You're building down the tiers of playable space. It's focusing the player on the next tier of where they can go and explore. Fly to the station, land, it brings you to the FPS map, the smallest, theoretical space in Star Citizen, but it's also the one that's got the most fidelity, the most interaction. You enter the station and it needs to be laid out realistically. One thing we didn't want to do is, even though we're a sci-fi game, we don't want to be contrived. We don't want to use that but sci-fi excuse as a crutch. Suspension of disbelief is a contract, I believe, between developers and players. We want to honor that as much as possible, so we build probable locations, even when they're space stations. Why do you think we stick toilets everywhere? You know, it's kind of immersive. It's making the impossible seem possible by eliminating improbability. It's affording players with more explorable space as well, more intuitive ways to explore, and again, back to that legitimacy. It's building up that legitimacy. So how do we build these locations? Well, we build most of our locations with kits. Kits are kind of like prefabs that you can use to build multiple variations of an environment based on a particular theme, like an asteroid base or a space station. It helps us to build larger locations. We have fewer bespoke locations because of it, but it allows us to eliminate that sort of locked door syndrome. We can build the toilets, we can build the bedrooms, you know, we can build the bits of the areas of the game that you might not see in other games. I'm not going to promise that we don't have any locked doors, by the way, but we're trying to eliminate them all as much as we can. So you use this model, and the player can get through the multiple tiers of Star Citizen to get to this. It's a kitchen, and you'll have to trust me, but there's a tin of beans in there. It's not quite like finding a needle in a haystack when you've got a legitimate universe that's got consistent and reliable systems. So even in space stations, this is possible. We've got lots of playgrounds in Star Citizen. You know, the combat playground, for example, we want to holistically blend space and ground as well. You might see a landing pad that you can land on, you can get out, and it might be in a nice vantage point where you can scout the enemy below you. But maybe you were flying, let's say, a Gladiator, which is one of our bombing ships, and you bomb the entire landing pad, you bomb everything, and you're going in hot. We want to blend seamlessly, but even through gameplay, this transition between space and ground, and make a more holistic experience. It's kind of like, I think we call it an epic sandbox combat arena. There you go, you can stick that on the back of a box if you want. So my final point, just about these tiers of drama, how do we sell them? Like, what is the thing that pulls the player through them? Well, we want the player to feel vulnerable. We want items to have importance. You know, we're inspired by movies like Gravity and Sunshine and Interstellar. Space is a dangerous place, and I don't think there's an experience quite like the one where you could be floating in zero G and you've got your oxygen running out and there's an O2 container just out of reach. Or, you know, your ship's being, you know, blown to hell and you're trying to crawl to the next solar system so that you can get repaired or, you know, find maybe an O2 container or something. So what gives purpose to moving? It's these items, it's these events. It's what gives you pause. It's what places weight on your actions as well. There's as much emphasis pulling you down to an FPS encounter as there is pulling you to an entirely different solar system. Ultimately, the goal is to let the drama emerge organically. To me, that's the true nature of what Space to Ground means for Star Citizen. It's being able to put the player in the isolated, infinite abyss of space and say, just go adventure, knowing that they've got the tools and we've established the systems that allow them to put together their own plans and goals. We know the drama will unfold all by itself because we've built those structures, even if that drama is as intimate as I need to find a tin of beans. And that's me. That's Star Citizen. Thanks very much. We're going to do some musical chairs. The laptop's not very hot, it's all right.